Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jean-Paul Gauthier. I am the Indigenous Education Consultant for Secondary at Grand Erie District School Board. I'd like to welcome you here this evening on behalf of Joanna Roberto, the Director of Education at Grand Erie, Griffin Cobb, the Principal of Pauline Johnson, and the Indigenous Education team here at Grand Erie. It is now my honor to introduce you to Trustee Claudine Van Every Albert.
Welcome, everybody. I'm sure you'll enjoy our guest tonight. It was wonderful this afternoon. I just wanted to mention that, as many of you who are here know, we normally start formal gatherings with Onondaga, or the Thanksgiving, as a reminder about our place, the people in the natural world. So tonight, when we finish this group of talks, we'll have Deho Honda Miller come up and he'll close for us. Nyaugoa.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Monroe, and I'm going to do our land acknowledgement this evening. The Grand Erie District School Board recognizes 6 nations of the Grand River and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation as the long-standing peoples of this territory. We honor, recognize, and respect these communities, as well as all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who reside within the Grand Erie District School Board. We are all stewards of these lands and waters where we now gather, learn, and play in the spirit and commit to working together in the spirit of reconciliation. At this time, I'm pleased to turn it over to Eli and Jean-Paul, who are going to introduce our guest this evening. Thank you.
Rick Hale is of the Beaver Clan of Tuscarora Nation of the Haudenosaunee at the Grand River. He holds a master's degree in American Studies of the State University of New York at Buffalo. He is a former assistant director for public programs at the National Museum of the American Indian, Smithsonian Institution, museum director at the Institute of American Indian Arts at Santa Fe, an assistant professor, Native American Studies at SUNY Buffalo. Hill previously served as senior coordinator of the Indigenous Knowledge Center at Six Nations Polytechnic. In Oswego, Hill is presently working with a group of historians on a book focused on history and legacy of the Mohawk Institute, the oldest Indian residential schools in Canada. He is currently the Indigenous Innovation Specialist at Mohawk College in Hamilton.
Oren Lyons is a faith keeper of the Turtle Clan and serves as a member chief of the Onondaga Council of Chiefs and the Grand Council of the Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee people. He is Professor Emeritus at State University, New York at Buffalo, and has a Doctor of Law degree from Syracuse University, where Lyons Hall is named in his honor. Chief Lyons is an All-American Lacrosse Hall of Famer and honorary chairman of the Haudenosaunee Nationals lacrosse team. He is an accomplished artist, environmentalist, and author, and is a leading voice at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Human Rights for Indigenous Peoples. Chief Lyons has been honored with numerous awards for his work, including the United Nations NGO World Peace Prize, the Ellis Island Congressional Medal of Honor, and the Elder and Wiser Award of the Rosa Parks Institute for Human Rights. Oren and Rick, we are honored to have you join us in conversation.
Hello. That's all I have to say for tonight. Thank you very much. Some people will say that was one word too many. Well, Chwants Askanahang, I'm a Tuscarora. We follow our mother's side of the family. My mother's a Tuscarora from across the river at the Tuscarora Nation near Lewiston. My dad was a Mohawk from Grand River. And as you know, we're one people, 6 different nations, but we live kind of very different lives. Our communities are spread out all across the territory of Ontario, Quebec, New York, Wisconsin, Oklahoma. We have about 17 communities altogether. Tonight we're going to share some ideas about 3 very different topics: lacrosse, leadership, and climate change. And at first you may scratch your head, say, what do they have to do with each other? How are we going to make sense out of that? Well, be patient. It'll take us a while to weave that all together, but we'll do that. We're fortunate tonight to have Oren join us. He's probably the oldest chief within our confederacy. He's been on the council for a long time, seen a lot of things. But I would also have to say, it was 4 years ago today. I was supposed to be the MC at an honoring for Oren. But unfortunately, my son passed away that night, my son Travis. And it's taken me 4 years to kind of recover from that, but also to be back here again to honor Oren for his experience. We worked together at the University of Buffalo for many years. We worked to help to recover the wampum belts that were taken from our communities. And we also worked together on the lacrosse team. So Oren, we're going to kind of begin with lacrosse. And as we know, next month, the Haudenosaunee men's national team is going to go to San Diego to compete in the World Lacrosse Championship. We were banned from competing in World Championship for about 100 years. And then one day I got this phone call from you-know-who, and he said, let's form an international lacrosse team. Well, I rolled my eyes and I said, oh, okay, well, let's go try that. And now here we are. Our team is now third in the world. You think about that, about 70 countries playing and the small communities we come from. We're second in the world in indoor lacrosse. That's really quite an achievement. And I have to acknowledge that it was Oren's idea to get that going. But with all things Oren, there's a bigger picture. And the bigger picture was how this would reinforce our nationhood, how it would reinforce Haudenosaunee sovereignty. So, Oren, I thought if you could share with us about that. How do you see lacrosse as being important to manifesting our nationhood?
Oh, Kachikwa, that's the name of a game. Chikwa are the players, and it's old. In the cosmology of the Haudenosaunee, this game was played on the other side of creation while the earth was still covered with water. That's a pretty old game. And part of the story, our story, a creation story, talks about the time and the players on that side. I'm very pleased to see our game now being played around the whole world. I understand there's 36 teams lined up for the indoor box this fall. That's quite a few for indoor. And the boys will be playing this summer, end of June, the beginning of July, in the World Games, the outdoor game. And so the game itself has carried us. And I want to say that Rick is an old-timer, been working with me for a long time. And when we were going to play our first international game against Australia, they asked for our flag. And we used to always enter the arena with the native flag of feathers and the long whoop. And so I said, well, we can't run that up. We can't run that up a flagpole. So we had the task, Rick and I, we had the task to get a flag. And we made trips. We went around the whole Six Nations to get ideas, and everybody had an idea, but it was all different, each one. So we made an arbitrary decision. And this particular one right here, this is the Hiawatha Belt. I said, we don't have to design a flag. It's already done. And you can't get a better symbol than that. And because of the Tuscaroras coming into our confederacy back around 1712, maybe, it took 1722 for them to get all the way up here. They became the Six Nations, so we made this flag. I said, we just made an arbitrary decision. That's the flag. So we made the flag, and we flew 6 eagle feathers with it, representing the additional 6 team, or 6 nation. And so it's very old. And in the center, you see the tree of peace. And that has been our message. Our message is peace. The historians and the people who write history, which is not us, who are always the subjects, made us bad guys. They didn't emphasize that tree of peace. You know, we were those pesky redskins. We tipped over trains and wagon trains and just fierce people. And the reason why is quite simple. You can't take land from a good guy. So we got to be bad guys so you can take our land. Not complicated, but very deliberate. And so our Confederacy flag, the Hiawatha belt, Hiawatha, the Union. We're talking about, there it is, it's plain, it's very plain, there it is. This is probably the first United Nations in the whole world. The whole concept, the whole idea. It's about 1,600 years old now. Contrary to a lot of so-called historians who said our Confederacy came together just around about the time that Columbus stumbled on our land. So we've been the subject of historians and history, and we rarely get to write our own story. But it goes on. And so what Rick and Barry White, Marilyn White, and John Mohawk, these were young people at the time when I was coming back to Onondaga from New York. I was an artist in New York City. I worked with advertising, if you can imagine. I knew more about Americans, and they certainly didn't know much about me. But today's times now, we come together, and these are very, very serious times. And essentially, we have to keep hope for the people, have to keep hope for the people, because that was our instructions. That's what we received early on in the Confederation. Never take hope from the people. So you leaders, which is us, you leaders always give the people spirit. And so today, as a species, you know, the human beings come in all colors, all sizes. We're like dogs. We come in all shapes and sizes, but we're one family. We're our family. And we have to look at it in that way today for survival as a species. We're in that position right now. And as the earth is heating up from our total mismanagement of everything as human beings, we're facing serious crisis. And talking with the The young people today, this morning, you know, I had a great empathy for them because we're handing them a big job of our mismanagement now. It's going to be up to them to straighten that out. And I'll just make one more statement here. That is, when I went into the Army in 1950, beginning of the Korean War, there were approximately 2.5 billion people in the whole world. And it took thousands of years to get there. So from 1950 to today, there's now 8 billion people in the world. We've tripled the population in one lifetime. Better wake up, folks. It's not sustainable. Not enough water, not enough land. And the adjudication of water is serious. There are places in this world who have almost no water. And then here we are, sitting in the Great Lakes. We got almost a third of the potable water, and we're messing with that. So these are facts of nature, not of politics or not of anything else. It's the reality that we live in. Nature's the boss. It's always been the boss, and if you don't understand that, you simply suffer the consequence. There's no mercy in nature, just the law. And the law is what we have to follow. So the Confederacy, the old Confederacy, is based on that law. And as you look about and you look at the political situations in the world today, and in particular the United States, you know, going back to Civil War, South against the North, blue states, red states, ridiculous. And here we are facing an existential crisis for all humanity, and you got a war going on in the Kremlin. I mean, where is the common sense in the leadership? So that's the reality we are in today. And that's the good news. So we're going to get to the bad news yet.
Oh, when I hear Oren talk, he always makes me feel guilty because I have 12 children altogether. So I'm responsible for 1% of the Tuscarora Nation. But on the other hand, you can't have indigenous rights or realities without people. So I chose instead to increase the population of our dying nation. He mentioned that we designed that flag to raise at the lacrosse tournaments. Now you see that flag everywhere. Our people have embraced it all over the place when you see that Sony flag. But I'll tell you, the first time I saw the flag being raised at the lacrosse field, I have to tell you, it was quite an emotional moment, because here were all the other nations of the world standing in honor of our flag and the fact that lacrosse comes from us. So it changed my mind, because I used to be one of those people. I would always sit when the national anthem was played, you know, I would always kind of like my quiet protest. But when I saw the other nations stand to honor us, then I said, well, if you want respect, you also have to give respect. So since then, I've been standing when their flag comes up to their nation. It's not saying that I agree with everything the U.S. or Canada or Great Britain has done, but I respect the fact that that is who they are, because they're respecting who we are. So that's how lacrosse got us into this international arena again. The Six Nations have been, the Haudenosaunee have been accepted as a member nation in the International Lacrosse Federation. But we face a big challenge. Lacrosse is likely to become the next Olympic sport. It was a sport one time, but it kind of died out. There wasn't enough countries playing. And a Haudenosaunee team participated in 2 previous Olympics, one out in Los Angeles and one in St. Louis. And in fact, the one in St. Louis, it was an all Haudenosaunee team that won the bronze medal. There were players from 6 nations. But they were playing with a Canada jersey. Well, we're not doing that anymore. We're the Haudenosaunee. We're going to play for our nation. But our nation isn't accepted within the United Nations. And in order to compete in the Olympics, you have to have that recognition from the United Nations. Oren's been involved in the United Nations for well over 25 years. So Oren, what do you see as a way forward? How are we going to get the kind of recognition necessary for us to be recognized as a nation in the international arena?
Well, number one, we have to keep our team going, and we have to be competitive. When I was talking to the head of USA Lacrosse some years back, his name was Steve Stenerson, and Steve, I said, what's your player pool to choose your 23 men, which represents the U.S.? What's your player pool? He said, maybe 450, 500,000. That's his player pool, 500,000. Choose 23 men. He says, what's your player pool? I said, maybe 150. We're third in the world. And at this point, I want to have my son Rex stand up. Rex, will you stand up? Now, Rex is our high scorer for 3 world tournaments. He's played in 3 world tournaments, and he's been our high scorer. The last game was in '98. And he's picked up a lot of my work right now. But it's his generation, men like that are out there representing us now. It's important. The Confederacy is important because, as you see in the center of the Union there, the Onondaga Nations, represented by a great tree of peace. So peace is essential. Peace is vital. That's our mantra. Not what the politicians call us, and not what they call us killers and wagon trains and so forth, and then never told our history. Never told how we instructed them about democracy. And I'm working right now on the 1775 Treaty of Neutrality, where our Confederacy agreed with the request of the Continental Congress at the time, can you stand to the side in this coming conflict with Britain, our father, and let us settle this between us. And our leaders at that time said, we had a discussion with your father earlier this year, and he said the same thing. Both sides were afraid that if the Six Nations took a side, that side was certainly going to win. And so we agreed, 1775 Treaty of Neutrality. And I'm absolutely sure that none of you know about that treaty and how important it was for the development of what is now the United States, and how fundamental it was when they came to us and they asked us with their hats in their hand, can you stand to the side? That's the history that you don't know. And I didn't know that. When I got to be one of the council members, I had to learn. I had to learn on my feet. And when we took our Confederacy and all the Indian nations to Geneva, Switzerland in 1977, and we got out of the grip of both Canada and the United States and Central and South America, and we went to Geneva. And then we moved into the international field. And we found out that the whole world loved Native people, except here. And the reason was simple. It's all about land. It's all about clearing title to land. But now, it's more than that. Now we're at this edge here where it's the survival of us as a species. So it's important for us to have that broad perspective. All of us, every one of us that are in this room, have a responsibility for future. You know, it's been told, you know, to us in the beginning of our Confederation, 7 generations. Make your decisions on those people, 7 generations. So 7 generations ago, there were leaders that made it possible for me to be sitting here talking to you. And 7 generations from now, hopefully, we'll see those 7 generations as we're pushing it. So it's times like this where we have a chance to come together and have this kind of a perspective presented so that we get a grip on reality and where we're at.
You know, the Haudenosaunee Nationals travel on a Haudenosaunee passport. We are citizens of our sovereign nations, so we don't go as Americans or Canadians, and no matter where you were born. And it's been a challenge. When he went to Geneva in 1977, they traveled on a Haudenosaunee passport. When Tuscarora, our leader back in the 1920s, went to Geneva and England, he traveled on a Haudenosaunee passport. Passport is a symbol of your nationhood. One time I went to England, and I walked up and handed the agent my passport, and he literally threw it back at me. He said, "You're not getting into our country with that damn thing." And they put me in customs all day long. They threw me in a jail overnight, and they tortured me with English food. And then they deported me in the morning. But what they said was, because I flew out of New York City, the U.S. wasn't going to let me back into the U.S. because I had invalid travel documents. So I arrived at the Kennedy Airport. Now, he warned me before I went, you're supposed to get a visa. I didn't get a visa. And then he also said, you know, how I should negotiate customs. So I followed his advice. There was a woman custom agent. I handed her my passport, and she literally shrieked. I don't know what's to explain, because it usually doesn't happen with me and women, but she just said, "Oh my God." And then she said, "I've heard about this. I've been dying to see it." I said, "Not only do you get to see it, you get to stamp it." She picked up her stamp and she went, "I better talk to my supervisor." So out comes the supervisor. Before I know it, there's about 15 agents standing all around me. But they're fascinated by this because it's in English and Onondaga, and they were having a really great time looking at that. And then finally the supervisor handed me my passport, and she said, "Well, Mr. Hill, welcome back to your country." I said, "Would you stamp my passport?" She says, "No, but welcome back to your country." Since then, now think about this, the Haudenosaunee have traveled to Germany, England, Australia, Czechoslovakia, Finland, Israel, Japan, all on our own travel documents. So that's why not only lacrosse got us there. I told you I got deported. Well, a few years later, we went back, and wouldn't you know, we're traveling with the Haudenosaunee Nationals, called the Iroquois Nationals back then. I went to the same airport and walked up to the very same agent who refused me entry. Gave my passport. I said, "This time you're not keeping me out." He said, "I know, Mr. Hill, we've been told to let you through." And our whole team got through customs in about 25 minutes. But that's the power. You could say that this lacrosse and having friends around the world, who was a member of a British Parliament that sponsored us. Our passport's been challenged because of Homeland Security, and it's still a struggle. So in order to get into the UN, we need this country code. And if we can get that, then we can travel, we can use our passport to more places. Right now, it's a negotiated deal. Oren's been fortunate to travel probably more than anybody else on the Haudenosaunee passport, but it's not easy. So this upcoming event in San Diego, we don't need a passport to board an airplane. But I think then it goes to England,
Yeah.
for the next games, and then there's even some games in China, and that's going to be quite a challenge. So we could all use your support on that to notify the Canadian government that you support the Haudenosaunee Nationals traveling on their own passport, and maybe the success will come our way. But it raises a point, too, about leadership. So we got into England because somebody in the Parliament agreed with us and sponsored us, helped us get in over there. Let me just read this. As you know, Canada has a new king. He's the head of state. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But Charles II, he came to Canada when he was still a prince. And he visited with native people out west. And he said that it's imperative that the leaders of the future should work with indigenous knowledge keepers, that was his quote, to restore harmony with nature. This is what he said. This is his quote. We simply must learn practical lessons from traditional knowledge through deep connections to land and water about how we should treat our planet. Goes along with what you've been saying. So when we think of leadership, when you hear the word sovereignty, what does that mean to you? What does Haudenosaunee sovereignty mean?
Well, you know, it's mentioning the new king. He's going to be different. He's going to be much more inclined towards the environment. He has been all of his life, and I think that was one of the reasons why his mother carried the crown right to her grave. She knew his leadership was going to be different. And it will be, I believe. But he's going to be much more inclined towards the reality that brings people together. So we'll see, you know. So I'm hopeful about that. And in the meantime, the reality is, of course, the Earth is heating up, and it's heating up fast. Ice is melting all over the world now. The snows of Kilimanjaro, that famous story of the snows of Kilimanjaro, there's no snow in Kilimanjaro anymore. It's gone. And in many of the mountains around the world, the ice is melting. That's the reality. Doesn't care about your politics, doesn't care about your nations or anything. It is the reality. And that's one of the reasons why we're sitting here, is to remind everybody, you know, if you're concerned about the future, and you should be, and you're concerned about your children, and you should be, well, now's the time to act. And so it's going to take people like all of you in this room to turn that. You're going to have to talk to your leaders, and you're going to have to be vocal about it. We can't wait around for politics now. And so I'm just pleased to have this opportunity to put that message out there.
When you mentioned one time that sovereignty is the act thereof, what did you mean by that?
Well, that was been our, you know, one time when that question came up about sovereignty. You know, sovereign is a French word, and it talks about kings, and it talks about ultimate authority. And we understood that. Our leaders quickly understood, but they put a different emphasis on sovereignty. They put the ultimate authority in nature, all of our nations, right straight across anywhere in the natural world people. They knew who was boss there. And so it's important now to understand how our conduct is going to direct and also determine what the future is going to be for our children and grandchildren, 7 generations. In other words, what I'm saying, you better make sure that there is a 7th generation. We're at that point. And we don't have a lot of time. So I think this discussion is very important to get that message across, make sure you hear what I'm saying. And at the age of 93, I've almost 100 years of perspective now. And when I started out, I was looking at the young children today, we were talking. I said, I was sitting in that chair. I didn't know what was coming. I had to learn. And I've been a runner for the Confederacy because I went to a university and because I had the language of the white man, they would say, okay, you go. And here's the message you carry. So basically, it's what I've been. I've been a runner for the Confederacy around the world.
What are some of the issues you've had to face being a chief?
Well, the basic issue was carrying the Haudenosaunee passport. But it's so politically charged. And what I find out is that our perspective internationally is very strong. If you go anywhere in Europe, around, I just love Native people. But American, what we call Indians. And that was a misnomer. We're not Indians from India. But that was, that was Columbus's mistake. He thought he was in India, so he called us Indians. So we started right out with a mistake. Then here comes an Italian by the name of Amerigo Vespucci, and we became Americans. That was Italian. Come on. I said, where's the indigenous? So when we went to Geneva in '77, we said, how do we announce ourselves? Now it's our self-determination. And we had a meeting. I had a meeting in that island off the shore of British Columbia, 1975. And we had to determine how we would announce ourselves. And we talked about Native, we talked about all of the descriptions of us, and we decided finally, a very contentious and long discussion of North, Central, and South American leaders, that we would call ourselves indigenous, because our people are not one kind. We have islanders, we have people in the Arctic. They're not all Indians, but they're all indigenous. So we decided that we would announce ourselves when we went to Geneva as the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. So that's where the word indigenous comes from. And now you see it everywhere. But reminding, even this morning we're having a discussion at the breakfast and so forth about the term. And indigenous is a very collective term about Native peoples. But each of those Native people have their own nation. They have their own, Arapaho, Cheyenne. You just name it. They all have their own names, their own languages. There's today left in probably North America about 500, a little more than 500 separate Indian nations still surviving with their own languages, still here. And now with the world population at 8 billion, just reflect on that, 8 billion people in the world. And just 70 years ago, when I was 20 years old, there were 2.5 billion people. And better reflect on those numbers. That's the reality we're in. We're in an explosion. We're in two positives. One positive is the ice is melting, and the other positive is the human population is exploding. Not enough water, not enough land. So it's going to take adjudication, it's going to take cooperation, it's going to take understanding that we're all human beings. We're a species, and we're at risk. So you talk to your leaders. Never mind about control, never mind about power, but talk about 7 generations. It's essential for survival. And the earth, of course, is the earth. It doesn't matter at all to the earth what happens to us. No concern. It's going to be here. It's been here for 5 billion years already, or a little bit more. And we as a species are pretty short-lived, actually, come to that kind of a time frame. So we're a question mark. Do we survive or not? And the only way we're going to survive is to work collectively for the common good. collectively for the common good. Not one man being a billionaire and the other with nothing. That's where we're at. I have to think about that.
You know, that's a real challenge because municipalities like Brantford are predicated on more growth. They want more development, more homes, more toilets flushing, more cars, and it's up, not considering the consequences of that to the seventh generation to come. And I think there's the challenge of how do we get political leaders to understand that less is better for the future because it generates more taxes and then they get to spend more. So I think it's a real dilemma. When you look at what's going on here, you know, they put in this green belt, a protected area. But now they want to dismantle that for industry, and for more growth. So if you actually drive through the green belt and take a look around what's going on, there's very little green left in that. So I think what Oren is saying is correct. Our time may be limited because the systems we've inherited keep grinding away, keep pushing ahead. And Indigenous people, particularly the Haudenosaunee, have been trying to be the voice of conscience about this. In 1977, Oren and John Mohawk and Mike Myers worked together to produce a book called The Basic Call to Consciousness. And you can find it online, and I recommend everybody read that. It's a little dated, but the perspective there about the systems that we're trying to work against. And it's very, very challenging. Now, you've met leaders from all around the world, religious and parliamentary leaders. Did you find any resonance to this kind of thing you're talking about, working towards the earth?
We're starting to wake up. I'm dealing with a lot of amazingly powerful financiers right now because they see it. They see it coming. They see the collapse coming of your monetary systems. And they said that the capitalism that's in control of almost everything in the world is so instilled and so involved that you're not going to change it. It won't change. When they ask us, what is one of your principles, we said our fundamental principle is to share. Share what you have. And we have an agreement and a treaty, and one of the oldest treaties after our Confederacy, and it's called One Dish, One Spoon. Everybody takes a bite equally around the world. One dish, one spoon. Well, that concept is, they took that and they said, okay, share, we'll do that share. So now, if you ask them for a share, yeah, you got to buy it. You buy a share. They flipped the whole concept on its tail. You go buy a share. So there we are. But the inequity that is prevailing around the world today is the problem. Some people with nothing and some people with everything. I know of some very wealthy people. I've been involved with, sometimes I walk into that circle and they do have one line that they're very angry about. They have to get in line. You know, usually they want instant success right away. And this, they got to wait. There's a line. And you know what the line is for? Yachts. You got to get in line for the yachts. So there you are. I mean, but you know, us in this room, and I'm inclusive, we're all pretty much the same. We're just common folks, and we have a responsibility to the future. So I think that's what the Confederacy has to offer at this point, is that principle of sharing, and we got to get back to it.
Earlier too, we talked about there was an experience that happened in 1799, and these four beings came from the sky. They took this man on a journey and looked back, and he was able to see a lot of things happening. And they were forecasting what might come true. Now you got to remember, 1799, who would believe that the water would become undrinkable? People couldn't really understand that, but that's what they saw. They saw things changing. They saw the trees dying from the top down. but they also saw the earth withholding its sustenance. Strawberries aren't going to turn ripe. The crops aren't going to grow. You could say then we have, since 1799, our leaders have been concerned about that. How are we going to survive this? Or are we kind of just wringing our hands, but we have to do something? So what's your take on that vision of 1799?
Well, my take is that indigenous people are going to survive because we've been in that survival mode for a long time now. We've been poor, so-called poor, but we've always had community. And community is really what you want. Community is what it's all about. The human community, the community of the natural world, they're all communities, and we are really responsible for all of that. And we have to get back to that responsibility. And we're wasting time right now. We're in wars, if you can imagine. This war over there, and it's just amazing that bombs going off as we're sitting here, going backwards. We're going backwards at an amazing pace with every bomb that goes off. It's affecting all of us. And when common sense should be, we all should be sitting and talking about the common good and talking about the 7 generations. We have to reach that point, and it's going to take common folks like you and us to make that statement. I mean, you have to bring these politicians into line, and for the children, for the future, for 7 generations. And so when you get to this situation, I have a philosopher. He's a pretty good thinker, I think. I'm amused by what he says. I don't know if so a contemporary guy. His name is, he played for the New York Yankees. His name is, I think what is his name? Oh yeah, Yogi Berra. He said some funny things, but there was a bite to it. He said things like, well, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. And one thing that I'm listening to him about now, and it's been in my mind now because we're at that stage, he says, well, it ain't over till it's over. So that's right where we are right now. It ain't over till it's over. And I would say right now that this battle of reality is starting to take shape, and we're coming together as a species to self-defense here. So you got to speak up. Common folks got to speak up, and be careful who you choose for your leaders. Be careful. Be careful about that. But here we are, and this is going back to Yogi. It ain't over till it's over. So the fight is on. And I look at this whole situation something like a prize fight, world championship fight, 15 rounds. We're in the 15th round. And it's even. The fight is even. So that's where we are. So you got to put everything into it right now. Talk to your leaders, talk to your family, and common folks got to take charge. Common sense back. Common sense versus dollars and cents. Simple as that.
Well, that's a good point, too, that you either can take prophecy or the gloom and doom that the sky is falling and just throw your hands up and say, well, I'm going to live it up until it comes to an end. But the challenge that was given to us is that make sure it's not your generation that's responsible for letting it come to an end. You have to work hard at that. So maybe we've been distracted by a lot of issues along the way, what happened to our people. But one thing that Oren's voice has been consistent as long as I've known him is about if we don't put our collective minds together to reestablish this loving relationship with the earth, yes, and we're going to suffer. It doesn't matter about sovereignty. It doesn't matter about treaties. It doesn't matter about all of that stuff. If the earth, the very earth that we were gifted to and gifted with, is not going to be sustainable. So as climate change is coming, as we know, it's going to severely impact on our community. We can already see the results of that. You know, right now I think there's over 100 wildfires across Canada, and about 30 of them are truly out of control. Tens of thousands of people having to flee their homes. And you have to ask yourself, what is the earth? What is the sun? What are the thunderers trying to tell us? They're trying to get our attention. And in the creation story, they said that the elder brother, we call the sun, he rises up and he stops midday, pauses for a minute, and he looks down to see what humans are doing. And what his instructions were, if you see that humans are fighting, turn up the heat. Try to get their attention. Try to get the humans to stop thinking about this and think about the universal plan for peace. You could say our master plan. So maybe that's what's going on. The sun is trying to warn us by amping up the temperature. The thunderers are trying to warn us by sending rain and floods to wash away all human-made structures. To get back to that elemental thing is that we're sacred beings born in a sacred world, and we have a sacred trust. If you actually look at religions and cultures around the world, a lot of people believe that same kind of thing. But if I hear clearly what Oren is saying, it's time to act on those beliefs. It's trying to bring our minds together, bring our belief systems together, so that one day, way off in the future, a little baby is going to be born into this world that is bountiful, plentiful, and lovable. And right now we know we're not in that situation, but we're given an opportunity. So rather than fight each other, because one of our warnings in the Great Law is that people are going to start fighting. Sometimes even the chiefs are going to start fighting among themselves, and that tree has the possibility of falling over. But there's a prophecy that it's the young people that are going to rally to stand that tree back up, because they need it, they see it. And we kind of felt that this afternoon. We feel these energetic young people that were here in this room. They listened very carefully, and I think they're going to respond in kind, because Oren told them it's part of their responsibility now. As young adults, they have to act. And maybe they have to act better than we did to try to change that. You want to talk about this?
This is the two-row. How many out there are familiar with this belt? Raise your hands. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. 1613. And it runs over a long period of time. And, you know, it wasn't one day, it was a series of events, a series of time. But 1613 it started.
Let me hold that, because you talk with your hands, but you got to keep the mic up to your mouth.
There's two rows. And that was our leaders speaking together with the Dutch. I was speaking with the Dutch at that time. And we said, well, we're going to make an agreement. They wanted an agreement so that they could do trade. And our leaders said, let's broaden this out into our relationship. So this is our canoe. And we don't have a lot in that canoe. It's very slim, and it's pretty much the same. And this is your boat, and your boat is just jam-packed with everything. And these three rows in between are three principles, and they unite our two vessels. This is the road of, this is the life, and these are two vessels going down the river of life side by side, and we're linked by peace, equity, and the future. These three links here put our vessels together. You in your boat and we in our canoe. 1613, that concept. And many nations have held that. George Washington has held that belt. All of your leaders have held that belt. France has held that belt. Spain has held that belt. They depend on that. That's a union of common sense, I would say, for future. And that's an agreement. It still stands. It's still here. So we just got to get back to adhere to that. We got to stay together. We got to work together for the common good. And the original belt is like this. Doesn't have an end because it goes on. But in the beginning, there's no. It just starts. That's the beginning. 1613. Those are good mines, and if you see those two rows, it's called a two-row belt. That for years and years, the American government kept that belt. They had it in their archives. We now have the original belt back. And so, because of what it says. And so here we are, back to the Union, back to working together for the common good, for all of our future. And I'd say it's going to be a good fight. I hope you guys are up for it, you know. It's going to be a good fight, but you got to speak up and you got to whack your leaders aside the head and tell them to wake up here and get back to the reality of future 7 generations.
Or let me just say a sharply worded letter. So what we heard is that we have a common destiny, that river of life. We're both, we coexist on it. Our treaty arrangement was that we're going to work together for that. These principles, these old principles that come from 10, 15,000 years of living on this particular land here. And just like the king said, there's knowledge in that canoe that could be helpful for the people of the ship to recover that loving, sacred relationship to the earth. So we wanted to leave you with that thought today. We appreciate you coming here. We'd like to thank Joanna for arranging to get us here, Deha Hande for providing the opening and the closing. And I also wanted to acknowledge Ray Sky. Ray, would you stand up just a minute, please? Ray is the artist who made this work. He spent his adult life studying what it is, the teachings of our people, put it into a real form. The Haudenosaunee, we continue this. We carry it on as best we can. It's not always easy, and we face a lot of difficult things in our way. But think of that, the principles that were given to our people when the world was created, when the Great Law came, when we learned that the earth is in jeopardy, there were principles involved, shared with us, and we have to get back to those principles and apply them in real creative ways. And it takes both the energy of the youth, the wisdom of the elders, and perhaps some creative financing, but I think we can find a way to do that. So I'd like to conclude with our presentation today. I think we really enjoyed being here this afternoon, talking to the young people, and thank you for the time you shared with us today. Is there a last thing you'd like to share?
Yeah, just one more statement along with the great law of peace. That's the full statement. You just don't say the great law. You say the great law of peace. That's the full statement. A lot of times now I've heard leaders use the term great law, and they use it as a term of authority. They don't put the peace. But that's the tree of peace that you see over there. That's the tree of peace there. You see it depicted all over. That's a great symbol. That's in the belt here, I went that belt. And so peace is the message. Peace is the message. It's the only way we're going to survive. And they should just scrap a couple of those great warships they have, or a couple of those great planes, and put it back into the ground, and the people working for the common good. Peace. That's the message.
And one thing that helps that is our expression of gratitude. So Tehahande, if you could come up and share our closing, our words of thanksgiving as we honor all of those things that we've inherited.
Gunjokwa. So what the home CEO Scott Nagari West. Negari walk Eddie Wayanda Aqua, Nana Agari one holder. Nana saw we air the walk one hodongo, walk what the no what I don't you where. Uri Wagwego Zini, some what got one in the hero in a dam. Onagadi hate to Nate no and see what daddy what he hunter. Dietino Horado, Nate Star John Jade, and you know when you got our seat that guns at Aqua, then a ungwe suma. Negadi net, you got to go Ryadas, and see the other one John. I do what go on that way, Dietino Horadonsike, Uri Wagweguzino holder, some what got one got to Johan Jade. Gwego Naganaga, Suma, Gunja, 8 Togundi, a Gwego, Ohunjage, Zinahudi Uduni Haje, Garaje, Ne Unokwa, Kaheta Gesum, Nene John Hekwa, Neohundessa. Not the Uriwage, a Gwego Nagarunda Suma, Zinu Gundi Dakinunjes, Nenegunderio, than a Zito Ogua. Nungidi 8 to 8 Nue, Ohunjage, Zinohodas and what got one, what did you know what I don't know? Dietone to Aganiswan, Negora. Negadine Oni, Zitkaron Yade, Sauyerum. Ziniuti, Sungwatka Wani, Aguego, Sego, 8 to Neodiera Haje, you not got one Hajina Odi, such dancera. Iangoya Dayeri Stakwa. Nungadi 8 to 8 no Arde. What you know what I don't know? Aguego Nahoda, Sego, you not got Wahaje, Zitkaron Yade. Dietone to Aganiswan, Negora. Negadine Nua, Ona, Yagahewe. Dundayetino Horado, Nedium Kiardo. Azika, Ona, Yagahewe, Adawede Nigura Ka Shongo. Negadi, Ayutiri Hua Negasen, Edium Kiardo, Nanescana, Ayaguano, Danu Sege, Scana, I did what ways in Oyaguatan Jungwa. Negadi Ne Oni, Nene, Scana, Ayaguano, Danu Sege. Nanazini, what Nigura Yada, or when he said, Nugget 8 to 8 near the Ditino Horada Nadion Kiardo, Diet to Nito Aganesawa Nigora. Neoni Nesum Guayatism, Roy Adam, Aguego, the Hayerite. Zini, Zit the Hadi Canyo, Zitkarum Yade, Neoni Zitkarum and John Jade. Ne Aguego, Scane, Yoyote, Ianguadi Wage. Nugget 8 to 8 near the Sidwano Horada Nesum Guayatism. Diet to Nito Aganesawa Nigora. Doga Tana Hodi, Dagaderi Hokrase, Hizikiwa is way at that songs of what got way, Nagana Horadotsala, Daytonikawanage, Dan Ona Eto. Okay. When the elders speak, we must do it. A brief translation for that is we received these understandings right from the very beginning, because we have to remember that we are the babies here. Everything was here when we were placed here on earth. And it was creation, what we call creator, and many other names that we use for that great intelligent energy that surrounds us. It's everywhere. It's part of us. We're part of the land. That's our body. That's our physicalness. And we're also part of the energy of the sky world. That's our intellect. And we were given these instructions on how to be in partnership, to be in a relationship with all living things. And everything is alive. And so we go across the earth and we talk about us as human beings and our responsibilities, and our responsibility to everything that's alive. And so we name all of these things. We talk about the waters, we talk about the fish within the waters, we talk about the lands and the grasses, the medicines that are there. In the fields, our sustenance crops, corn, beans, and squash. Strawberries are coming soon. The forests, the trees that give us the very air that we breathe. And in the forests are the animals that we're given instructions as well. And some of those animals we call gunderio because they accepted the responsibility to be giving of their own flesh that we could eat. And it's the same thing with the birds. And so to all of those things here on earth, we give greetings, love, and respect. And this is the way our minds should be. And also, we do the same thing across the sky. And we say all of those things that are in the sky world, we're there for a purpose, are there for a purpose. And we talk about the thunder beings, their responsibilities, the four directions of the winds and their responsibilities. We talk about our eldest brother, the sun, and his responsibilities, which were spoken about briefly today, in partnership with our grandmother, the moon, who is in charge of the coming faces. And that's why we respectfully call the women folk our mothers, because they're the ones that bring in the new families that come, the new faces that are coming, new relationships that are coming. And so that's why she's our grandmother. And the stars in the sky, we hardly give them any thought, but they're there for a purpose. And it's our responsibility to be a part of this preservation, part of this respect that was talked about earlier on today. And then we say this is how our minds are to be. And then we talk about these ones we call Diunkiadadum. There are protectors. There are other energy beings out there that helps creation. And those beings are responsible for our intellect, and they're also responsible for our safety. So we've asked them, and we've said today to join us, because everyone will travel today, and we ask them to take you safely through your travel, that you arrive safely to where you came from today. And to them, we say greetings, love, and respect. And this is the way our minds are to be. And last, we start with the beginning, where all of this was put into motion by a thought. And it says in our language, Rawero, Ayohunjadige. Rawero, Nana Uwe, Gonto, Ayeterundege. And that means that the thought created this earth that we live on in preparation for us as human beings. And think about that, to take that personally, because that's our reality. And this is the way our minds are to be. So this great intelligent energy, we say greetings and love and respect, that you put in a perfect puzzle together, the sky world and the earth world, and made them one. And so this is how we give our thanks, and there's the reasons that we give our thanks. And those were the words that have been given today. Ta'etu ni kawanake, tana etu.